Welcome to the program today. My name is Mondo Gonzalez, and I'm here in studio with a special guest, Avi Lipkin. Welcome, Avi.
Great to be here. This is our first time.
Yeah, it's
Yes.
been good.
Yeah.
And there's certainly a lot going on. You are an expert on really the Russia-Ukraine connection. And for those of us, in our audience, we're recording this really in the height. The Ukraine war has been going on for several weeks now, for sure. And Avi is a great expert in this category. So kind of give our audience some background about what you've done, your expertise, and then kind of what you're doing at the present moment.
Okay. Well, firstly, I want to start off, if I may, take about 5 minutes to talk about my family, because my mom and dad were immigrants from Argentina, but their parents came from Russia, Poland, Ukraine to Argentina about 110, 120 years ago. And I think as far as genes go, we have a lot in common with the Russian, Ukrainian, Polish mentality. Something in the genes, I don't know. And of course, Argentina. Then my parents moved to America. My grandfather of blessed memory told me that according to what he remembered, I was only 16 when he told me this. He said that we were descended from the King of Poland. Why were we descended from the King of Poland? Because the King of Poland had a beautiful daughter, and my forebear was brought over, like many Jews, from Germany to run the Polish kingdom, because the Jews knew how to read and write, and they knew mathematics, so they could take care of the budget and raise taxes. And he said to me, when people would, be in the presence of my forebear, they would prostrate to the ground, like in the case of Joseph in Egypt, where Joseph was like Pharaoh, but except in name. We built the walls of Warsaw, and we were knighted by the King of Poland and given the Slavic name of Kamień. Kamień in Russian and Polish means stone. If you were from Germany, it would be Stein, in English, stone. And so, okay, you could say fairy tales, but when my brother of blessed memory was dying of cancer, they did a DNA test on him, and they said to my son, where did you get Norwegian DNA? Now, the King of Poland at that time was Norwegian.
Wow.
The Norwegian and Swede together, they conquered Poland. They defeated the Russians. And now what happened was, and this is really where the story begins, the Jews were sent all over the Polish Empire, from the Baltic Sea, from Lithuania all the way down to the Black Sea almost. And the Poles, were a great empire. They were a great country. And because the Jews knew mathematics, the Jews were the tax collectors for the King of Poland. So they were not beloved of the Ukrainians. We ruled over the Ukrainians. And so in 1648, there was a rebellion led by the George Washington of the Ukrainians, Bogdan Khmelnytsky, and 500,000 Jews out of a total population of 1.5 million in the world were slaughtered by the Ukrainians. So what happened in the Ukraine actually for the Jewish people was kind of like a Nazi Holocaust. The Jewish population then jumped within 200 to 300 years up to 18 million, but at that time we were 1.5 million. They also killed Polish noblemen who served the King of Poland also. Catholic nuns and Catholic priests were all slaughtered by the Ukrainians. Ukrainians are Orthodox Christians, like the Russians. Okay. In 1683, the Polish army under the King of Poland, Sobieski, led the Polish army down to Vienna with some German barons, and they liberated Vienna from the Turkish encirclement. The Turks were trying to conquer Vienna. So the Polish fought a war against the Turks. This is the beginning of the push back, pushing the Turks back to Turkey. So those two wars, 1648, 1683, then the Russians were getting stronger, and then so the Russians began their process of defeating Poland and the Ukraine. So Russia, Poland, Ukraine, they are Slavic nations. They're all like brother nations. And the Russians pretty much were dominant until today. one of the problems of the Jewish people, of course, was that we served the King of Poland, so the Ukrainians and the Russians hated us. There was another problem. If you remember, 1492, the Jews were expelled from Spain. Who took them in? The Turks. And so the Jews were working for the Turkish Empire also. So the Jews, again, with their talent, they were serving in the administration and in the military. And so what was happening at that time was that the Ukrainians, the Cossacks, and the Russian Cossacks, they were moving south. You know, there's this big fight today about Crimea. Does it belong to Ukraine or does it belong to Russia? Well, the fact is, it really belongs to Turkey. It was taken away from the Turks by the Russians. So the Ukrainians hated the Jews also because there were Jews to the south in Turkey. So, of course, the Jews are on the wrong side of history. The Jews are with the enemy. They're with the Poles and they're with the Turks. That's one of the reasons why if you saw Fiddler on the Roof, you saw all the trouble that the Jews were in the middle of, and expulsions and killings and rapes, murders, everything. And so many Jews decided that we don't want this God business anymore. That's why Jews became communists and socialists, and today in America, Democrats. Because who's responsible for all our suffering? God. If God hasn't chosen us as the chosen people, we wouldn't be suffering so much. So the communist ideology is there is no God. That Muslims, Jews, and Christians have no God, and they are together as human beings. The problem is that that didn't work. But meanwhile, many Jews fled from the Ukraine. In the Russian Civil War, we have a replay again. You had the Reds versus the Whites. The Whites were the pro-Tsar or pro-nationalist Russians. The Reds were the communists and socialists. So Jews really could not be in the White Army because they were hated because of anti-Semitism, so they all flocked to the Russian Communist Party. So when the war came to the Ukraine, see, this is very important today too. So the Jews represented the enemy of Ukraine because Ukraine was anti-communist. But what can we say? You know, the communists won in the Ukraine. And there was a general in the Ukrainian army, and his name was Semyon Petlura, and he killed 100,000 Jews in the Civil War in 1920-21. And in World War II, the Germans come in, and the Ukrainians welcome the Germans because they hated the Russians, they hated the communists, they hated the Jews who were together. So you had in World War II a Ukrainian leader by the name of Bandera, and Bandera was an anti-Semitic, pro-Nazi leader. So all of this, of course, is a horrible history. But I have to tell you, I grew up hating Germans. I mean, I grew up hating all Christians, but Germans were the worst. And I don't want to go into my own personal testimony about, how, I don't want to say Jesus because a Jew cannot say Jesus, but about how Jesus changed my life because I went to the churches, and even in South Texas, you have the New Bavaria there, New Braunfels, and I went to a church there, and I saw blonde, blue-eyed German Americans crying tears for Israel when the pastor was preaching about Israel. I said, well, hey, you know what? Texas Germans are kosher. Then I went to Switzerland, and my first book came out in German by Hensler Verlag, a very well-known German publisher. And when I went to Switzerland, I said, you know what? These people are also crying tears for Israel. I said, Swiss Germans are also kosher. But in that group, there were also German Germans and Austrian Germans. I said, you know what? The problem isn't the Germans. The problem is Nazism. So if I overcame my hatred of Germans and realized the problem was Satan, the problem was the Nazi satanic system, well, the system for the Ukrainians was very similar to the German system. But Ukrainians are great people. And so I love the Ukrainians. I love the Germans. I love the Russians. I think I've been so contaminated by the Christians that I love everybody. And but you see, what we see happening today in the Ukraine is basically a replay of World War II and all the history before. Because the Russians look at the Ukrainians always as the little brother, but the little brother who was wrong. And the Russians are going to educate them, that kind of a thing. What happened, two things happened in the Soviet Union. Firstly, many Ukrainians became Russians by intermarrying with Russians. They're Orthodox Christians. And so you have many people today in Russia who have a Ukrainian mother or Ukrainian father or a Russian mother or Russian father. And there are protests today in the streets of St. Petersburg and Moscow, and no matter how much police arrest these people, more and more people show up. So it's becoming a very, very big mass movement. I don't think Putin has a long time left. They have a Jewish president, Zelensky, in the Ukraine. Some of his advisors are Jewish. And this guy is ready to put his life down, for the defense of his homeland, which is Ukraine. And I personally, if you want to hate him because he was an actor and he was a dancer, you got to hate Ronald Reagan. Yeah. And Ronald Reagan, I think, was one of the best presidents America ever had. He's popular in the eyes of the people. And I think we see a remarkable overcoming of anti-Semitism in the Ukraine today because of this Zelensky. And regarding Russia, Putin was always a good friend of the Jews. He has a history also of being very good with the Jews. The problem, however, might be afterwards, if and when Putin is removed from power, there might be some anti-Semites who will say, you know what, we're going to get the Jews now because Putin was defending them. And I had a flight over to the United States a few weeks ago, and sitting next to me was an Orthodox rabbi. And he said to me that the Russian government had in its budget, its official budget, there was a budget for the Jewish community. And he said, well, the Ukrainians, they don't give the Jews a penny. All the activities of the rabbis in Ukraine are from private contributions coming from the United States and other countries. But the Russians support their Jewish community. The problem is, as you know, that there are sanctions now on Russia, very, very painful sanctions. I don't think, Putin knew that would happen. So this is what we are having to watch now. What I have been hearing now is that there are about 150,000 people in the Ukraine, 50,000, I don't want to say pure Jewish, but, not intermarried with Christians. And about 100,000 are 50-50, half Jewish, half Ukrainian, or related by marriage. Of course, you have Christians who are married to Jews. And according to the law of return, these people are all entitled to move to the state of Israel. So that's 150,000. How many do we have in Russia? 500,000 people who are Jewish or Jew married to Christian. And so the Christian spouse has to come also.
So there's been lots of immigration in the past from Russia. Kind of share a little bit about your thoughts as it relates to what would be the latest cause for the immigration? You think Putin's removal?
Okay, firstly, I wanted to say something. I've been living in Israel 54 years. And I'm going to talk about this in another program about terrorism in Israel. Not necessarily right now, but we had a tremendous wave of immigration. It wasn't the first wave, but it was the major wave in 1988, 89, and 90. And about 2 million Russians and Ukrainians, in other words, the former Soviet Union, they all came to Israel. And about 400,000 of them are amongst these that I mentioned, who are half Jewish or 1/4 Jewish, who came according to the law of return. For those watching this show who don't know, the law of return, when Hitler had his Nuremberg laws passed in 1936, he said, anyone who has one Jewish grandparent is a Jew and will be killed in the crematoria and the gas chambers. So the Israeli government took that law and said, we're going to apply that in reverse. Anyone who has a Jewish grandfather or grandmother or married to a Jew can move to Israel. So what happened was our non-Jewish population grew tremendously in Israel. Until that time, 2% of our population was Christian, Arab Christian. Today it's 2% Arab Christian and 6% Russian Orthodox or Catholic or Protestant that came from the Soviet Union. So today the Christian vote in Israel is 8%. Now the Muslims have 10 deputies in the Knesset, 10 members of Knesset. The Christians don't have one, not even one.
Now, why do you think that is? Why don't they?
Because they're not organized.
So that's pretty much it. I mean, they're obviously voting, but they're just voting for...
Firstly, you have to remember that years ago, decades ago, you needed to pass a threshold of 2%. And the Arab Christians were 2%. However, 1% was Catholic, 1% was Orthodox Christian, and they hated each other because of the split in 1053 between the Catholics and the Orthodox. And then within the Catholic Church and within the Orthodox Church, you have families, clans that are fighting each other. So culturally, these Christians are Arabs because they fight each other and they could never get together. Then when the Russians came in, the Russian and Ukrainian non-Jews kind of said, just leave us alone. We don't want to get into politics. We're living in Israel. We're in the Jewish state. And so many said either we become Jewish or simply we won't get involved in politics. The problem is that what we see happening in Israel is a growth of ultra-Orthodox fanaticism in the land of Israel. And so this runs contrary to the interests of the Arab Christians, the Messianics, the Russian Orthodox, Catholic, Protestant. By the way, we also started getting Jews and Christians coming in from Ethiopia, about 150,000. Now, I don't know who's Jewish and who's a believer in Christ, but the point is, if Israel is a democratic country, there should be representation for all the different groups. And I have 2 Christian Ethiopian candidates in my party. I have Russian and Ukrainian Christian candidates. I have a few Orthodox Jews, like myself, running. No taxation without representation. But think for a moment what happens when 150,000, now I'm not saying all of them will move to Israel, but when, let's say, 100,000 or 50,000 move to Israel, that's a big number of immigrants coming to Israel, of Jews and Judeo-Christian families. 150,000. Russia has 500,000. And what's happening now with Putin is that the Russian economy is crashing, is crumbling, and many, many Jews are saying, we have to get out of Russia now while we can. So the El Al flights from Moscow to Tel Aviv are full of immigrants. Those who cannot fly, and that includes Russians, take the train to Finland, and once they're in Finland, they can catch a plane anywhere they want. Russia, and it hurts me to say it because the Russian people are good people, but they're suffering so much that they are now fleeing from Russia to other countries. The brain drain that you had before in Russia is now super brain drain. The Russian population is shrinking. They have 140 million, but they're losing about 1 million every 5 years. The population of Russia is shrinking. In this age of internet, we all joke about the bad things of the internet, but the good things to be seen are that the people in Ukraine and people in Russia have become westernized. And especially the young people say, we don't need this nonsense from the Middle Ages. Yep. Kill the Jew or kill this or kill that. We just want to live. And again, I have to tell you, I love the Ukrainians. I love the Russians. They're great people. If it is true that 14,000 Russian soldiers have died, Russian couples have maybe one child a family.
Yeah, that's a big deal.
So you have 14,000 mothers and 14,000 fathers they're not even getting the bodies back. It's horrible, horrible, horrible. And I mourn for the Russians and I mourn for the Ukrainians. And I just hope that not only will Ukraine have a sovereign, independent, democratic country, I pray that Russia should overthrow this old-fashioned totalitarian system. Russia needs democracy. And one other thing which I think is very important, until the war started in the Ukraine, I remember everybody was talking about that Russia and China together against the United States. Well, Russia now is getting militarily degraded. And so Russia is getting weaker and weaker and weaker. I think the Chinese are learning a lesson from this, meaning they should not really be thinking about, attacking Taiwan. Yeah. On the other hand, I heard that Rocket Man wants to invade South Korea. The South Korean military are on total alert right now. In other words, it could be that there are madmen or crazy people who are saying, well, we better attack while we can, because if Russia is degraded completely, we have a problem. And that applies also to Iran. Iran, all of a sudden, one day will say, you know what, we can't build our bomb now to destroy Israel because Russia is not there to defend us anymore.
It'd be interesting.
This is super interesting. So, for whoever believes in God, this is a sign from God that God is moving. And I'm very excited to be alive in this time. But I do think we're going to see hundreds of thousands of immigrants coming to Israel, Jewish and Christian. So my Bible Block Party.
Yeah, I was going to say, let's take a little break here, because one of the things that Avi has done in his book is he's anticipating the idea of massive amounts of immigration. Again, people with these, again, religious Judeo-Christian affiliations. And so we're going to take a little break here. You can see not only how to get this book, but some of the other material. I mean, you've written 7, 8 books already.
7 books. I'm working on my 8th
You're
book.
working on your 8th, so we'll take a break here.
It's always a special treat when our old friend Avi Lipkin joins us straight from Jerusalem. Avi always provides us with his unique Israeli perspective on world events. A former spokesman for the Israeli Defense Force, Avi has spent the last 30 years traveling all over the world, speaking to churches, synagogues, civic groups, and making countless television appearances. He was also one of the few voices in the 90s to warn Christians about the coming terrorist attacks. Over the years, Avi has committed his teachings to paper in the form of 7 books. Never one to shy away from controversy, Avi pulls no punches as he discloses what he feels is the #1 threat to our Judeo-Christian way of life. Soon, the armies of the Middle East will unite to destroy Israel, and Avi's insights on these coming developments will provide you with more pieces of the end times puzzle. We'd love to send you all 7 of Avi's books today for your gift of $79.95 to our ministry in what we're calling the Avi Lipkin package. These resources will open your eyes to sobering facts and perspectives that go unreported in the Western media. These details will prepare you for what is indeed on the horizon. When you give to support Prophecy Watchers, you not only receive these valuable resources, you're helping us further our ministry's mission. An integral part of that mission is actively partnering with men of God who are currently engaged in alerting those who will hear to a number of emerging scenarios. Among those, Israel is the focal point of action. We look forward to hearing from you soon. Call us at the toll-free number on the screen or go to our online bookstore at prophecywatchers.tv to support this relevant and vital work. Remember, everything that we are doing at Prophecy Watchers is made possible with your support, so stand with us today.
So before the break, we talked about just what's happening now with Russia and Ukraine, and how really the political circumstances are such, and the war circumstances, that people are looking to get out. So let's talk a little bit about really the motive, the philosophy behind what you're looking to do in just getting the word out as it relates to the Bible Block.
Well, I have been speaking in churches now in America, Canada, Mexico, Europe, Israel for 32 years. I started speaking about the Bible Block Party in churches in 1998, so that's 24 years ago. Together with my lawyers, it took about 11 years. It cost $100,000. Checks written out by Christians, made out to the lawyers. It wasn't made out to me. I would go around the country and get the checks for the party are made out to the lawyers. Now that the party is recognized, we cannot raise money anymore outside of the country. So
really?
Yeah. And the law in Israel is that Israeli citizens only can contribute to the party. And they can give about 1,000 shekels, which is about $300 a year. And the Israeli government is very strict about this. So we went into a very straight path financially. And so I had to basically give $10,000 loan to the party, which one day has to be returned to me to keep the party going. And so now I'm in the States, I'm doing meetings, and if people want to contribute, it has to be to me. I have to pay tax on the money,
of course,
because I'm a politician. I cannot do a 501c3 for a political party, otherwise I go to jail. And I'm a politician, so I really don't want to go to jail.
Let's talk about the, you mentioned before the demographics, the lack of representation for really, Christians and really those that believe the Bible in the sense. So let's say the next, you get people, you get enough to be a member of the Knesset. What's the goal? What's the goal of the Bible bloc?
Okay. Firstly, I believe that our party will be the biggest party in the Knesset, because I believe there will be millions of Jews and Christian spouses and relatives moving to Israel from the United States also because of inherent chaos or civil war, God forbid, that could happen in America. But at this moment, the minimum that we need is 140,000 votes. It's 35,000 votes per member of Knesset multiplied times 4. The threshold is 140,000. If we get 130,000 votes, nobody gets in.
Wow.
So 140,000 votes. My first calculation is the Russian-speaking immigrants. Eventually, the Israeli Hebrew speakers will join. The Arab Christians will join. The Ethiopian Christians will join. I think there will be Jews who will vote because they will say, what is Avi trying to do? He's trying to create Judeo-Christian Western civilization and democracy in the land of Israel. You have to remember, until now, the population of Israel, half came from the former Soviet Union, the Soviet Socialist republics, half came from Islamic countries. And
so they're not used to democracy.
They're not used to the American system. And my faith is in the American system as it was.
Yeah, as a way, I agree.
Before some of the bad stuff happened.
What are some of the challenges that you've seen over the past couple of years?
In Israel?
In the sense of promoting the party.
Okay, firstly, I have to tell you, I was Likud all my life. I was a Netanyahu supporter. But what happened was Netanyahu's strategy, and he was prime minister for 13 years running, his strategy was to maintain power. He built up a coalition, and almost like a Catholic marriage, with the ultra-Orthodox rabbis in order to get the 61 out of 120. Now, we had 4 elections, and it was impossible to form a coalition. And in the last election, Netanyahu, with the Orthodox, ultra-Orthodox, had 52 out of 120.
That's it.
And Naftali Bennett succeeded with centrist party, with socialist parties, with a Muslim party.
Yeah, I was there with the Arabs, yeah.
Let me tell you, this is really a national unity government.
It really is, yeah.
But it has faults. But it allowed him to form a coalition, and he's in the coalition. I was just now at the Jerusalem Prayer Breakfast in Dallas, and I met with the Minister of Religious Affairs, Matan Kahana. And I have a great reverence for him because he is against the fanatic, ultra-Orthodox monopoly on religious power in the country. And I don't know if we have time, I'll do it real quick. Ben-Gurion gave 500 exemptions in 1949 for the ultra-Orthodox to study in yeshivas. The population grew 10 times since then, so 7 million Jews instead of 700,000. So you would say to yourself, well, 10 times 500 exemptions is 5,000, 140,000 exemptions to study in yeshivas. And the problem is they are paid, they have many children, and they are growing in such a way that they are dictating to the rest of the population how to live. And there are some very striking similarities to the Persian, the fanatic Ayatollah type thinking. And women, of course, are not in a good situation in Iran. And I think the situation of women can definitely improve in Israel if we have the kind of government that we have now. So I support Naftali Bennett. Of course, once I get 4, I'm in the Knesset, and probably our 4 members will help get us over the top, not only elected, but to be in the next government.
In the next majority government.
Yeah.
Well, Avi, we don't have time for much more here, but as you can see, the nature of Israeli politics is extremely complicated, to say the least, for sure, especially their type of system, which allows coalition governments. But if you're thinking about this, we certainly would invite you to check out Avi's book, some of his other materials as well. He's got a breadth of knowledge and history going back to multiple countries around the world. So always appreciate your prayers as well for what we're doing. We're trying to continue to get the word out. We are definitely supporters of the modern state of Israel and recognizing that they have a right to God's land, for sure. So appreciate you watching, and we will see you next time.